It's time to step into the Coming Out Lounge, a cool, safe space to be true to your sexual self. With your host, Rick Clemens. Rick has helped hundreds of people come out of the closet, and now each week he's bringing you cool insights for loving and accepting yourself, boosting your self-confidence, and living a guilt-free, purpose-filled life on the other side of the closet doors. Cuddle up with yourself and get ready for heartwarming coming out stories, ideas for living authentically, and tips for being fully self-expressed. Now here's your host, Coming Out Coach Rick.
Hello, Closet Busters. It's time once again to stop that closet dwelling and to step out, step up, and step into living your truth. Because in all honesty, man, I think the greatest gift you can truly give yourself is to be yourself. And sometimes that may mean even doing a little work on yourself from the inside out and the outside in simultaneously. But I wonder, how do you do that and maintain balance and sanity and kind of keep that sense of peace and joy in your life as you're doing this work on yourself? Well, today, to answer that question, I've solicited some help from a man who literally did an inside job and an outside job on himself to truly finally strike a balance in his life. His name is Dillan DiGiovanni. He's a trans man, which means he is someone who's gone from female to male to align their soul, their spirit, their mind, their body all together. And he finally pulled some of his own Karate Kid moves, so to speak, in his life to be the person he always was meant to be. And that move really involved, interestingly enough, him having a life coach that kind of ignited this whole thing in so many ways for him, who helped him dig into what was deeper within his soul and to truly finally realize his life would never be fully what it was meant to be until he truly stepped into being himself. Literally from the inside out and the outside in. Please welcome to the show my friend Dillan. Hey Dillan, thanks for coming on and being here with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, absolutely. And you know what? I'm going to go right for where you and I were having the conversation about why it's important for you to be here today. Mm-hmm. And I think we both came to an agreement that there's a lot of trans languaging, trans stories being out there in the media these days. What I'm noticing, and what you so eloquently brought forward, is there's not a lot of trans men stories. We're seeing a lot of, the trans women stories with Caitlyn Jenner and people such as that. But for some reason, it seems that the trans guy stories are kind of somewhere still hidden in the shadows. And is that what you're kind of feeling as well?
Absolutely. And if anybody is visible, they match this very archetypal male appearance, right? So like this beard and this ripped body, or something, so there isn't a lot of presentation diversity when it comes to what does masculinity look like? What do men look like? What do body types look like? So it's you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, and I'm just going to operate from where I sit in the work that I do. For some reason, people seem really fascinated, and I say people because I don't want to point a finger, so to speak, but people seem to be fascinated by women doing just about anything, whether it's women changing their bodies to look better for their guys, or women going through the process of identifying that, yeah, I'm kind of bisexual, or whether it's women going through the process to say, I'm trans and I've never really been meant to be in this feminine body. There's interesting things. I mean, there's lots of stuff that seems to point to, as long as it's women, quote, women doing this thing, we can kind of swallow it. But the moment we bring the masculine piece into it, it's either shameful or we don't want to talk about that. And I bet as a trans man, and I hate saying that because to me you're just a man at this point, but you probably have gone through this battle of what is masculinity for yourself as you went through your journey.
Absolutely. In fact, I did a whole independent study on it as part of my master's degree, because for someone who transitioned so late in my life, I had to do a massive identity overhaul.
Okay, and so for the listeners, let's kind of clear. Let's make this really clear for them. You didn't transition until you were 34?
Yep.
Yeah. So it is a later in life thing here. So we'll get into some of that, but continue on.
Yeah, so it took a lot of exploring because I had this whole person that was alive, and I was also a feminist, so I felt like I am a feminist, and so I really wanted to be an intentional, positive male presence in the world, and I wanted to know what what does that look like, and what does that mean, and how does one do that, and how does one create that? So definitely.
What did you start to discover for yourself as far as how do you do that?
I could write a book, which I probably will.
Uh-huh.
I feel like there is a lot of misconceptions and misperceptions about men walking through the world as a man now, and by that I mean being perceived as one. Both men and women respond to me differently than they did for the 3.5 decades that I moved through the
Right.
world before. And I think, men have a lot of feelings that they're not able to express. I mean, just, kind of things that we talk around in our culture about what it's like to be a man, these expectations of what it means. And, so I guess to answer, I guess I'm still figuring that out,
Yeah.
but I'm figuring it out differently than it's different than what I thought it was going to be.
Well, I think you've struck a chord here that I know in my world, especially in the last couple of months, and this is ironic that you brought this up, I have noticed a huge movement in men trying to figure out what masculinity and manhood and everything is really meant to be. I've got friends who are writing books about mandates, which are going out on mandates, not in a sexual way, but going out and really connecting with other men. I have another friend who's talking about what it's like to be a vulnerable man. In fact, he's created a t-shirt that basically it says, I'm a huggable, lovable, vulnerable man. And it's printed in reverse, so you have to look in the mirror to read it, and it's kind of that mantra that you read to yourself each day. There just seems to be a lot of. In fact, I'm doing some workshops in some different retreats, and it's all for just men, gay and straight. And so I see this surge of what is manhood really meant to be? What is masculinity really meant to be? And I can only imagine from your perspective, and having, as you said, for practically 3 decades walked the earth as someone you weren't, to kind of step into this. Now, how does masculinity define me? So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about, your pre-transition life. It must have been almost painful, I guess would be probably one of the words that would describe it, and confusing, daunting. I mean, what was it like to really be in that space of, I know this isn't really who I am?
Well, to be honest with you, I think a lot of transgender people will say that they knew from a young age, but I was not one of those people. I actually went through my life feeling like that everything was fine. I definitely felt like more of a tomboy, but that wasn't, that was pretty common. It's just that I kind of never grew out of that feeling. But because there were no transgender role models, there was no visibility for transgender people for most of my life, I didn't have an awareness of I'm the wrong thing. It was just more I'm wrong in some way, right? So, but I couldn't understand how. And the real dissonance, the disconnect started to happen once I became exposed to it as an option. That's when the struggle began, which was, probably late, post 2006, 2007,
Yeah.
when I started meeting transgender people. That's when the inner conflict began, because there was this voice that said, "Ooh, that might be how I identify." But then there was this like, "Well, how the heck would I do that? I've got this whole career, I've got this whole identity, I've got all these relationships. I would have to change everything about me. Like, how would I even do that?" And I remember explicitly saying to somebody, I could never transition because I could never live in limbo like that. Not one or the other. And so I was battling myself. I mean, I wasn't even battling society, or at that point I was just still battling myself.
How common is this feeling, do you think, in the trans community that you're kind of hanging in limbo?
It's hard for me to say. It's hard for me to speak for other folks.
Sure.
I think
it's
everyone's
just because you
back-
brought it up. I speak. I sit on a lot of different panels, and I speak with quite a few transgender people on those panels when we're at schools and universities and such. But there was just something in the way that you said it that I never really thought about it that way. That I guess it is very much a limbo state of being, because it's a little bit different than sexual orientation. And that's a whole nother piece. I know in the trans world, people get that all confused about, it's, they're gay or lesbian. Well, no, that's sexual orientation. That's not gender identity stuff. But when you said that, I guess I don't feel like I ever hung in limbo as a gay man. I knew what I was attracted to. I also knew that I was a man and that I am male through and through. So this limbo thing is, I just really glad you brought it up, because it is a space of defining for people who may not understand. I don't really know who I am and how I'm supposed to be in this world. And so no wonder it's a limbo feeling.
Absolutely. And it's a daily thing. It's not like
Right.
it ever ends. I'm really glad that you wanted to focus on this for a second. And the thing I could liken it to, given, the topic of your show, is for someone who's closeted at work, right? Or in with family, right? So that is the closest thing I could say, is that like you feel like you're living two lives.
Yeah.
But with being trans, it's different, because even though I'm out, people who never out as a trans person,
Yep.
people who never knew me before will still call me female pronouns.
Interesting.
And people from my past, even though I've changed my name and I've changed pronouns, everything, they'll still call me the old thing, the old identities.
So I'm curious. Okay, because I'm going to be real honest here. I know we've never met. We've had phone conversations. That's about it.
Yeah.
What is it that triggers people to call you by those pronouns who've never met you before?
I wish that I could tell you, because if I could put it in a bottle and sell it so people would stop doing it, I could be a millionaire.
Well, I can tell you
But-
this. Of all the trans friends that I have and trans people that I meet, I mean, just over the phone and on the airwave here right now, the way we're talking, I would never have guessed anything other than you were a man. Your voice is very masculine. So this is interesting to me, and I
know.
find that this is very fascinating. Actually, I'm glad this came up.
I know. I think it's something in the wiring of the brain, maybe, where people are so afraid to mess up that because they hear trans, right?
Right.
And a lot of people, and I really want to give you a lot of credit for your fluency with trans male and trans female, because sometimes I'll say I'm trans male. Oh, wait, what does that mean? It's
Right.
like there's like a lack of awareness, right, for a lot of
Right.
people, and so they'll hear that, and I think what happens is their brain instantly goes, because to be fair, the brain is wired to compartmentalize
Yes.
on a very basic level, right? I mean, we are wired for the threat so that we don't die,
Right.
and so people need to put things in boxes. So I think people instantly say, "Wait, okay, so you were." And then their brain just does like this glitch where they just go with what was instead
Right.
of what is.
And I totally get that piece. I have to admit, when I first started speaking on PFLAG panels, and the first couple of transgender individuals that I was on a panel with, which both happened to be women, I stumbled around for the first few times when I would talk to friends about, I was on this panel with this guy who's now a gal, and she, I stumbled around. But now that I'm very comfortable in it, I think it's something that you're right. It is a brain thing. It's like, okay, I guess it's almost like as soon as you know the secret, so to speak, then it's kind of hard to take that secret out of your head of, okay, Dylan was a woman. Your brain instantly starts to go, well, then she. Well, no, but it's he. Now, I've seen your pictures numerous times in different places, and I would even still look at that and go, really, this is like almost amazing to me that people would question this. So I think this is a valuable piece for people to be listening to, that it's kind of like coming out. You never quit coming out. Well, you're never going to quit dealing with these aspects of being transgender. It will probably never go away for you, will it?
I don't think so. And for a lot of time, I'll be honest with you, I had a lot of anger because I felt like, what was the point of doing this if I'm going to have to do this for the rest of my life and answer these like inappropriate questions? You know, people go right into, which, you know, maybe we can get into or not.
Absolutely.
You know, like
I'd love to, because I think this is, even if mostly the people that are listening are trans or considering where they are in their trans journey or they're coming out, I don't care who's listening to this. I think it's so important to talk about what is appropriate and what isn't. So let's kind of just go there. I'm ready to go there.
Well, you know what, and being in my role as in my work, I always think like, who else is having these experiences too? So, you know, I go to say, oh, I'm trans, you know, because I don't want to hide who I am. I want to be open. Instantly, people will say, oh, so you've had the surgeries? So they're instantly thinking about something that's extremely personal.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like, and I think, who else experiences this? And it's kind of like when people put their hands on a pregnant woman's belly. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's not for you to do.
Not for you to do unless you're invited to do so.
Yeah.
So I think what you're just saying, I think this is really important, is to start to understand the layers of trans. There can be people, and there are a lot, who identify as trans and nothing about their body has been changed.
Right.
Okay. Then you have those who identify, and some go through partial surgery, top or bottom, depending on which direction they are going. And that's one part of the journey. Then the other part of the journey is you go through the entire transition. And I think this is important for people to understand. It's so much about what is in one's head and their perception of themselves as to where they go in the comfort level they do in the trans journey. I think that's the best way to kind of put it. I don't know if I could say it more eloquently, probably, but I think you kind of got to let people be people. And if they say they're trans, then you just accept. Yes, I know we're going to be curious. I mean, there still are conversations that I have from time to time, and I'm lucky that some of my trans friends trust me enough that they've shared very deeply, you know, where they've gone, what they've done, and everything, because they know I'm an advocate, number one, and they know I'm someone who has a voice out in the world. So if I can help this movement, I'm going to help the movement any way that I can. But I know what you brought up is, you know, this question of how far have you gone in the surgeries? I know from other friends of mine, the question that really most of them won't answer, some of them do, is, oh, well, what was your name before?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, well, what does that matter? You wouldn't ask somebody, oh, so what was your maiden? Well, I guess people do, but it's like, what was your maiden name? But they don't really ask that question. It's like, what the fuck does it matter? You know?
I'll tell you true. Like, I've struggled with my anger, which is why are you asking me these questions? No matter how many times I answer them, there's always going to be 15,000 more people online that still ask me the same question. But I got to the point where, and then I was trying to like not make their curiosity wrong, because I'm thinking, well, I am this thing that is this, you know, anomaly in our society, or, you know, is coming to more awareness in our society. So is it my job to answer these questions? Is it my job to educate people? You know, should I just step into this? This is why I was sent here? So I'm just like, you know, trying to figure out all the answers to all these questions. And it just...
But you brought something up that I do think is important. It is the question of, is it your job? Any more than is it my job to have to educate people on being gay? And I think this is what society misses, is people aren't going around saying, it's my job to make you comfortable with me as a heterosexual.
Right.
So, yes, there's a side of me that very much is the advocate and I want to educate, but that you reach a point where you're like, if I have to say this one more time, I think I'm going to scream. And I kind of sense that can get very easily for our beautiful and loving trans community. This can be something that begins to push the buttons and push the buttons and push the buttons till you just go, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, there's this thing of people say, oh, well, I'm just curious and I just want to understand. And there's this part of, like, I have two thoughts. The first thought is, you are never going to understand.
Right.
It's like understanding how it feels to be a tree. Like you're just not going to get it.
Right.
And then do you need to understand it to just accept it?
Right.
Because no amount of answering these questions is really going to help you internalize the feeling that I'm feeling.
Right.
So,
Well, there's a statement that I use when I'm working with clients who go, I just wish they could understand. Or I understand, especially when I'm working with a lot of my clients who are married and coming out of the closet, I just wish my spouse could understand. And I always say, nobody can ever completely understand somebody else. It's not possible because we don't reside in their bodies. We don't reside in their chromosome makeup. We don't reside in who they are. We don't reside in their soul. We can say, oh, I understand to a point, but nobody can ever really understand somebody else. And then as you were talking, it kind of took me back to a few episodes ago. I interviewed a mother and son. The son was transgender. And I remember her saying something that I thought was so beautiful. And she said, you don't have to understand to love. And I thought that's so true. Mm-hmm. And if we grabbed hold of that as humans in so many areas of our lives and realized we don't have to understand somebody else to love, we just can love, the world would be such a different place.
Yep.
So I know for you, the different place that you got to came from you were doing some work with a coach yourself. And you said that kind of was part of what opened you up to being able to finally say, this is who I am. Could you share a little bit of that story with us?
Sure. So I became a certified health coach in 2009 and was dressing in men's clothing because that was where I felt like I was identifying with this identity or label as genderqueer, and that's what felt comfortable. But I was wearing shirts and ties, and the community was incredibly supportive, really, really wonderful. And then I graduated in 2009 and started my business, and things were humming along. And then around, I guess halfway through, I just got. And it's so funny how it had stayed so quiet for so many years, but I think looking back, the act of that autonomy and that act of that self-expression of really putting myself out as an entrepreneur and really using my voice and really building a successful business and seeing that I could do it, I think was kind of this perfect storm or this formula that helped me then say, because I saw my clients having these really incredible successes. Yep. And then there was this voice that was like, you are still out of integrity with yourself, buddy. You are still avoiding this really big question that you've been dodging for, I guess maybe it was 6 years at that point. You're still not addressing this. So why don't you go do that so that you can have more integrity for the work that you're doing? And I another huge piece was that I had never felt better in my life. Mm-hmm. My physical, emotional, and spiritual health had never been stronger. Mm-hmm. So there was a clarity there that could come through that I think wasn't coming through before. It was easier to distract myself with habits, mostly around food. I was never a big drinker or using drugs or smoking. I never really did that much. So it was mostly around too much sugar, not enough sleep, stress. Those were my ways to distract.
What you just brought up is really important, though, in the journey, because it basically you were in a coming out journey like anybody else. You were coming out to yourself to be who you truly were. Mm-hmm. And what I always find it's most inspiring, it's also the moments that usually bring me closest to tears when I'm working with a client, is when they start to connect that this journey is now having beautiful impact in other areas of their life. When they come into alignment with themselves, suddenly other things start to happen. It sounds like yours kind of happened somewhat in reverse, in that suddenly you're successful in your business and it's growing and all these things, and then suddenly the little voice inside says, yes, but what's going to happen if you don't get this other piece in alignment? Mm-hmm. And what I often see happen is people start to get the sexual orientation piece in alignment, And then suddenly they wake up one day and go, and I really fucking hate my job, and I'm going to do something about this too. And I really don't want to be in this relationship, but I didn't want to be in this relationship for so many other reasons. And it just happens to be that my sexual orientation is the thing that kind of kicked it off. But I think this is powerful, powerful, powerful stuff. And you said it, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and oftentimes financially, everything begins to change when you step into that beautiful space of being fully aligned in yourself and fully embracing of who you are. So I'm going to do one of the trite questions you probably get asked all the time, but I'm going to put a little bit different twist. I would normally say, so what's been the most challenging thing for you in your journey? But I'm going to add something slightly different to the question. What's been the most challenging thing in your journey that you've learned the most from?
Ooh, that's a good one.
And that's usually the response I give when I ask people that question, because we know how to answer the first part of that pretty easy. But then when we go that I've learned the most from.
Trying to think of just one.
Well, whatever comes to mind, man. Whatever starts to flow. I mean, we've got plenty of time. We've got about 4 or 5 more minutes here, and I'd love to have you just share that.
I would say listening to myself, and the anger was telling me something. So rather than just being angry, because the anger came with a vengeance. It was like I had never been that angry at that many people for that long, right? And so it was like, what is this here to tell you, Dylan? And when I leaned into it and I realized that it was a bunch of different things, but mostly that it was about me wanting it, like just not accepting reality and saying, and trying to resist just what was. When this is where my Buddhism comes in, right? But it was like, you're going to keep being angry your whole life, kid, because people are going to keep asking you these questions, because the culture isn't going to turn on a dime. Just because you made this decision, it's not going to turn on a dime, and you got to get in this for the long game. So you got to find your patience from somewhere. You got to find your self-care. You got to do whatever it takes to not be angry for the rest of the time that you have here, because otherwise, what was the point of making this change if you're just going to spend it miserable?
I love this metaphor of the long game, and I never had really thought of it from that perspective, but I think that's one of the things that happens when we finally come to ourselves and come out to ourselves and come to these realizations in these big life moments. And it's not just coming out or realizing you're transgender or gay. But when we come to these big life moments, the real turning point is to accept that this is now part of what we're in for the long game. I know now that I'm gay, but I'm going to be gay for the long game. You're going to be transgender for the long game. We're going to make decisions like parenthood for the long game. I think these moments in life are so rich and juicy and tasty because it takes us to that next space of saying, yes, I'm in this now for the long game. And I love that you use that, and I'm going to actually steal that when I work with a couple of clients this afternoon, because I can already see how that can help them. But it is a big life-changing moment when we can say, okay, I'm accepting this, and I'm moving past this, and I'm letting the anger feed me spiritually, emotionally, so that I can move into the acceptance of this is who we are for the long game. So you brought this up a couple of times. I don't want to dwell on it greatly because we're about to wrap up here, but I noticed you talk about being able to look your anger in the eyes, so to speak. That is pretty big stuff right there. What's been the key to really starting to see that? And I know you said your Buddhism, that's probably a lot of it right there. But how would you recommend someone who is having these moments, which I think everybody who's ever come out has these anger moments, how would you recommend dealing with that?
Ask what it's trying to tell you. Like, because anger isn't a feeling, it's a response to a feeling. So it's a response to feeling silenced or betrayed or afraid or, some other feeling. And so identifying, why am I feeling that way? Is it either coming from an external source, or is it because I'm not listening to myself I'm selling myself out in some way. And so paying attention to what's the source of it. And then the next step is, so what do I want to do now? What do I need to say? What do I need to, do I need to eat some greens? Do I need to drink some water? Like, what am I going to do to get through this space? Am I going to, get away from this person that's saying this thing to me? Like, it's like, what's causing it and now what?
Perfect. So this is the Coming Out Lounge, and we are getting ready to wrap it up here, but I want to ask the question I ask every guest that comes on the show. Gay, straight, trans, I don't care what it is, but those that might be listening who are really, really struggling, if you could give them a piece of advice as they are going through their journey, what might that piece of advice be?
Be your own best friend.
I love that.
Take really great care of yourself. The long game also is it's a health. Being healthy isn't like a fad, right? It's about habits you have to do every single day. So taking really good care of yourself and always being your own best friend, because if someone can't pick up the phone or someone can't be there, you have yourself. You always have your own self.
Yeah, I like that phrase. You can never get rid of yourself. It's always there. It's always there lurking in the shadows. So, So Dillan, I have to say thank you so much for being on the Coming Out Lounge today with us. I love this conversation. I could continue it for another 30 minutes or more. But if somebody wanted to get in touch with you and talk to you about some of the stuff that you've shared, what's a good place for them to find you? What's your web address?
Website is my first name, Dillan, Dillan hyphen DIGIOVANNI.com.
Awesome. And yes, it's Dillan, DILLAN. I want to make sure everybody gets that one because it's a slightly different twist than I think some of us are used to. So, Excellent. And, if any of you have been listening today and you found this conversation supporting you, found it something that you could take home to the bank, so to speak, if it's really touched you in some way, we'd always appreciate some love over on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you're downloading and listening to the Coming Out Lounge. We'd greatly appreciate that with a rating or review. But we also say only if you feel completely compelled. If you'd like to hook up with me, you can meet me over at Facebook at The Coming Out Coach. You can also tweet follow me with @Rick Clemens on Twitter and the hashtag Coming Out Lounge. And Dillan, do you have a Twitter account that you might want to share?
Yep, Dillan DG, DILLAN, again, that A, DIGI.
Okay, cool. And I think we're going to call that a wrap. And as we always do at the end of each show, we're going to encourage everyone to go out there and never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping in to living your powerful truth. And speaking of living powerful truths, I have a powerful truth to share with the audience that my first book will be coming out shortly. It's called Frankly, My Dear, I'm Gay, A Late Bloomer's Guide to Coming Out Late in Life. So if you want to get an advanced copy of that or get on the mailing list for when the book's coming out, just hop on over to rickclemens.com and you'll find an area that talks about my writing and my books. You can sign up right there to get on the advanced mailing list. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll talk to you in just 7 days. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've just experienced the Coming Out Lounge. Go online to www.comingoutlounge.com to learn more, and tune in again next week for more stories and tips for being true to yourself.